We have a human cadet, Kale Dross, Frontier Division. The others will test him. Good. Let them. The Coalition Military Academy on Station Vaughn had been producing officers for 160 years. Its graduation rate was 63%, the most selective military program in the Coalition's outer systems, and its alumni held positions at every level of command across 12 active fleets. The Academy did not give placements on the basis of species. It gave them on the basis of performance. This was officially the policy. What the policy did not fully account for was the informal hierarchy of expectation that developed in any institution old enough to have traditions, the accumulated weight of which species had historically performed at which levels, who the program had been designed to develop, and who had arrived as a recent addition to the invitation list. Humans had been Coalition members for 31 years. Human cadets had been attending the Academy for 19. In 19 years, 11 humans had graduated. The current class had one. His name was Kale Dross. He was 22 years old, from a frontier settlement on the outer edge of Coalition space, and he had arrived at the Academy with a file that his admissions officer had read twice because the first time produced results that seemed inconsistent with his listed age. He had spent 4 years on active frontier service before applying, which was unusual since most cadets arrived directly from pre-academy programs, and his service record contained a number of engagements that the admissions officer had flagged for verification before approving because the numbers involved seemed high. The verification had come back confirmed. Kale had not mentioned any of this. He arrived, found his quarters, attended his first classes, and conducted himself with the specific quality of someone who was focused on the work and not particularly interested in the surrounding social architecture. The surrounding social architecture, however, was interested in him. The challenge came in the third week in Instructor Theron's Combat History and Doctrine class, a seminar format, 12 cadets around a discussion table, the kind of session where the teaching methodology relied on cadets engaging directly with each other's arguments. The topic was the doctrine of asymmetric engagement, how smaller forces achieved outcomes against numerically superior opposition. Cadet Zeth, a rail carry, 4th year, top of the current rankings, introduced the human question the way certain cadets introduce questions, which is to say with the timing and tone of someone who had prepared it. For the purpose of this discussion, Zeth said, addressing the class generally in a way that made it clear the address was specific, it might be useful to establish a baseline for what different species actually bring to asymmetric engagement. Combat experience as a reference point. Pause, precisely calculated. What would the kill count be for a typical Earth soldier at Dross's stage of service? For context, several cadets smiled. The category of smile that happens in rooms where a hierarchy is being enforced and the audience has decided which side they are on. Instructor Theron, at the head of the table, said nothing. He had been waiting for this moment since he read the file. Kale looked at Zeth with the steady light brown eyes that Theron had noted over 3 weeks never changed expression based on what was happening around them, only based on what Kale was thinking. That's a reasonable question, Kale said in the tone of someone who genuinely found it reasonable. Do you want the frontier service number or the total? The smiles held. Zeth said, with the specific patience of someone setting up a punchline, let's say total. For context, Kale said a number. The smiles stopped. Not all at once. The way a wave stops, the ones closest to him first, then spreading outward as each cadet processed what they had heard and ran their own internal calculation of whether the number was plausible for a 22-year-old human from an outer frontier settlement. Zeth said, with considerably less patience than before, that's not possible. The verification is in my admissions file, Kale said. If you want the operational breakdown, the engagements are documented. Most of them have footage. The instructor spoke for the first time since the question was asked. The footage is available through the Academy's operational archive. I've already pulled the relevant files. He looked at the class. Since we are discussing asymmetric engagement, reviewing actual case studies seems appropriate. He pressed the display control. The classroom wall became a screen. What followed was 40 minutes that Theron had structured carefully because he had read the file, and he understood that what it contained was not simply impressive numbers. It was a specific and complete education in exactly what the class was supposed to be studying. The frontier engagements Kale had participated in over 4 years were case studies in asymmetric doctrine applied under conditions that most of the cadets at the table had encountered only as theoretical exercises. Resource scarcity, communication blackout, numerical disadvantage, zero extraction possibility. The footage was not dramatic in the way that Academy training simulations were dramatic. It was documentary footage. The specific grain and angle of field recording systems, the sound of actual environments, the kind of visual record that carries weight precisely because it is not produced. By the 4th engagement case study, the classroom was completely silent. Not the silence of boredom. The silence of a room where 12 cadets and 1 instructor were watching something that was actively updating their understanding of what the discussion they had been having was actually about. Cadet Zeth, by the 8th case study, was not smiling. He was watching the display with the expression of someone doing a calculation that was going to take longer than the class period to finish. When the final case study ended, Thurin turned the display off. Asymmetric engagement doctrine, he said to the class, is most usefully studied not as theory but as practice. The question of what different species bring to the context, he looked at Zeth with the precise neutrality of a good instructor, is an excellent one. The answer, as we have just seen, is frequently more complex than baseline assumptions suggest. The class ended. Cadets filed out. Several stopped near Kale's position at the table, not to speak, but with the specific body language of people who had updated their assessment and were not yet certain what the new assessment was. Zeth stopped at the door. He stood there for a moment with the expression of someone who had asked a question expecting a particular answer and had received a complete education instead. The frontier service number, he said to the room generally, as though finishing a thought he had started 3 weeks ago. And the total are different by about 60? Kale said simply. Zeth left. Kale gathered his materials from the desk, the training spear he had brought for the practical component, his notes, and looked at the instructor, who was still at the head of the table. You already had the footage pulled, Kale said. It was not a question. Since the 2nd week, Thurin said. I was waiting for the right discussion topic. Kale looked at him for a moment with those steady eyes. Then something moved in his expression. Not satisfaction. Not pride. Something quieter than both. Asymmetric engagement, he said. It's always been the most interesting doctrine. He picked up the spear and walked out. Thurin stayed at the table for a moment. Then he opened the class performance record and began writing his assessment of the session. Under Cadet Dross, he wrote 3 words. Already teaching.